Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable guests, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. I am Mubin Jafar Mir, Research Officer at the Center for International Strategic Studies, Islamabad. And on behalf of CISS, it is my honor to welcome you all to our first working session titled Emerging Technologies and Concept of Deterrence in Contemporary World Order. I request Air Commodore retired Khalid Banuri to moderate the session. Air Commodore retired Khalid Banuri is a distinguished practitioner and scholar with over 47 years of multifaceted experience in public service spanning aviation, nuclear policy, arms control and diplomacy, education, international law, and leadership training. He commenced his career as a fighter pilot and flight instructor and is a graduate of elite institutions, including Pakistan Air Force Air War College and the UK's Joint Services Command and Staff College. He was the founding Director General of the Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs Branch at the Strategic Plans Division, SPD. He has been decorated with a Civil Award of Stara Imtiaz for Policy Analysis and Stara Imtiaz Military for services rendered in the Pakistan Air Force. He holds postgraduate degrees in security, defense, international law, and strategic studies from Peshawar University, Karachi University, Quaid-e-Azam University, King's College London, and University of London. With this short introduction, I invite Air Commodore retired Khalid Banuri to kindly lead the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for a very, very generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we start with the first technical session, and I would, at this point, would like to recall the kind of a situation which occurred on the morning after August 1945, when the first nuclear weapon use had happened. The world was trying to grapple with this situation of what to do, what to think. And they were wondering about what are the kind of things that we need, what are the answers to the several questions that get raised. And I, when I, 25 years ago, when I started to look at this subject, I came across this comment that not many knew even the questions to ask. And today, we are kind of in a deja vu situation where one subject is nuclear deterrence and the issue of sustainability of nuclear deterrence, and the other is the impact of the emerging technologies, where there's a lot of gray, and then the world is grappling with some of the questions, but also some of the answers, and where are they going to lead us to. Now, to discuss this and several other associated questions, we have a very, very eminent panel here today to talk about emerging technologies and the concept of deterrence in a contemporary world order. I feel very privileged to introduce the speakers. To me, several of them are textbook names who have established themselves in their respective fields, and they're looking at those areas. Of course, we would have diversity of opinions, and feel free to actually come and talk about those issues. I would be hoping that we will think of the sustainability of nuclear deterrence in this session, think of the emerging challenges that come across. Several of those, the issue of the low salience of lawfare in dealing with emerging technologies and so on and so forth, the issue of the speed of the decision making, which is invariably going to be a question to think of, and several other issues that our eminent speakers will hopefully raise. I'm very privileged to introduce my first speaker, Dr. Han Hua, who is an associate professor and director of Center for Arms Control and Disarmament at the School of International Studies at Peking University in China. She teaches courses in international arms control, disarmament and non-profession, international relations and nuclear deterrence in South Asia, and also the international relations theories. Her research interests cover nuclear-related deterrence and strategic stability, both in the regional and the global perspective. She had led programs and projects in these areas. She's been a visiting researcher at the Balfour Center at Harvard, also at the School of International Affairs at Georgia Tech, and at SIPRI in Sweden, at Stimson Center. She has written extensively arms control and non-profession and South Asia for journals and newspapers in China and abroad. And I would like to say that it is my honor to moderate a session the second time, Dr. Hanhua. The floor is yours, Madam, to talk about nuclear deterrence, new technologies, and great power competition, and the relevant topics that you may consider. You have 20 minutes, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's my really great pleasure to be here again after several years gap because I've been working on South Asia since the mid of 1990s. So I have been in Pakistan for several times, but I really feel pleased to be invited this time to have another time to really experience the new development in Pakistan. Also share some very plenary thoughts about the topic we are going to talk about today. So let me start by talking a little bit about what I mean when they talk about the great power competition. I think the concept came out in the very important government document under the Trump #1 administration in 1917, the National Grid Strategy. So in that document, in this document, they talk about the great power competition has returned. So since then, as a Chinese, we think maybe the United States has taken or identified China as at least one of the main adversaries or threats or challenge. What you want to use that, but it's very unprecedented for the Chinese because they feel like everything is changed when China was considered as an adversary or a strategic challenge by the United States. So in the new era, they think some demonstrations we have experienced in the age. The first one is a global, the global balance of power has changed. Some people talk about it's a trilateral world order, or some people talk about China-U.S. bilateral order, or some people say simply that doesn't change anything, still the unipolar world under the United States, Germany. So, but they have to talk about the great power geopolitical competition has really resolved some new tensions and flashpoints in regions or as global as a whole. And also we have already witnessed some new competition in conventional nuclear and new technological capabilities among states. And this new track in Chinese, we talk about the new track of the game. So after we talk about the concept itself, let me talk about the deterrence in the new age, because we think we have already experienced all the development of the deterrence, the concept based on the Cold War bipolarity. But now since has changed. The role of nuclear weapons has increased, given the new dynamics between nuclear and conventional weapons among the nuclear weapon states. And also with the emergent nuclear technologies, the traditional nuclear triad has transferred into an integrated or cross-domain or multi-domain deterrence. And thirdly, deterrence in an emerging multipolar world. Why we talk about that? Basically, when the U.S. Is talking about the two-tiered nuclear problem, that's what we think maybe no longer the bilateral nuclear deterrence. Lastly, I will talk a little bit about the extended nuclear deterrence has undergone significant changes. So one by one, let me elaborate a little bit. Firstly, I will talk about the increasing role of nuclear weapons. For example, very often now we talk about war fighting when we talk about nuclear, the role of nuclear, and they talk about maybe deterrence only for some, no longer we talk about only deterrence. Especially when we talk about when Biden administration started to take power, and we expected once the nuclear posture review by Biden administration was included in the concept of sole purpose, but it did not happen. And also we talk about the new reported, the U.S. DOD report on the nuclear employment guidance and the Space Forces, the space war fighting, that some new documents talk about war fighting scenarios. The role of nuclear weapons has already increased for my understanding. And also we have experienced some kind of a nuclear escalation scenarios in the Ukraine war. And the nuclear discourse not only about the potential use of nuclear weapons or escalation, but also about the attacking against the nuclear plants. The second one, I will talk about the transformation from traditional nuclear threat to integrated or cross-domain deterrence. With the emerging new technologies, the nuclear threat has transformed into multilateral domain deterrence, because we, for quite a long time, we talk about nuclear threat, but during George W. Bush administration, the new nuclear threat has already introduced the missile defense or some conventional infrastructure build up, except the traditional nuclear threat. But now, in Biden administration, the integrated deterrence has been used in the official nuclear posture review. And some people talk about the very emerging space technologies has been introduced, integrated into the strategic deterrent. For example, Trump administration in the first term, they create the Space Force, and Russians Space Forces in 2015, based on the 1992 Space Forces. China's military structure has also changed. We talk about the Rocket Force in 2015, and also now we know China is also it's also established the the Aerospace Force, Cyberspace Force, and the Information Support Forces the last year. So, and also we have already seen the AI or cyber role in the command control systems in the overall nuclear establishment. So let me talk a little bit about the two-peer nuclear problem. The problem, the U.S. Is saying U.S. Is now facing two nuclear weapon states simultaneously, namely Russia and China. And tripolar interactions is more complicated than the sum of dialectic interactions between Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War era. And Sino-Russian cooperation further complicates this dynamic. All these issues have been talked among Americans in think tanks. The two theaters, as a result of the two peers problem, one is in Europe, the other is Asia Pacific. And lastly, let me talk about the U.S. extended nuclear deterrence has gone significant changes. The great power competitions in different regions and the U.S. two-peer nuclear problem have led some changes in U.S. extended nuclear deterrence in Europe and in Asia Pacific. For example, the U.S. has strengthened forward deployment of its strategic assets. We take one example last year. The U.S. DoD planned to deploy technical nuclear weapons in Britain, and the U.S. is increasing visibility of strategic submarines or bombers in ROK as a result of a Washington Declaration. And also, we have already experienced some post-INF offensive missile, middle and intermediate missiles in two regions. And for example, in Europe, it's Germany. U.S. will deploy conventional armed ground-launched intermediate range missiles in Germany on a rotational basis beginning in next year. And the U.S. already deployed the missile system, including Typhoon missile system and anti-ship system in Philippines, maybe later time. So after I talk about the problem, the new concept. So let me talk about the challenges or risks as a result of the new concept of nuclear deterrence. The first one is a potential nuclear arms race. The development and the testing of nuclear new capabilities have already witnessed in major nuclear weapon states. for example, cybersonic or space capabilities. And also, they have already realized that the very increasing nuclear risks as a result of the new technologies. For example, they talk about the intended or the verdant escalation in cases of a geopolitical flashpoints in South China Sea, for example, or across Taiwan Strait, or in other regions in the Middle East, in Europe. And also, they have already heard some threats to attack nuclear facilities and attacking against the long-range early warning radars in Europe. So those two challenges or risks they have to deal with. And lastly, they cannot deal with effectively because the erosion of arms control regime they have already experienced for quite a long time. Only the New START treaties is expanded, but will expire next February. So let me conclude by saying, with those new technologies or new kind of the concept of nuclear deterrence, we have experienced new changes. Something good, something bad, and some challenges and risks. We have to deal with collaboration between the major nuclear weapon states or with other countries together. So with that, let me end up here, and I would like to listen some comments and criticism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving us the swiftest or the quickest scan of the great power competition, Dr. Hanwha, in the sense of the main takeaway that I have from your presentation is it's already complex and it's going to get complicated. You've given us the recipe of what the world can see as risks, as the new threats that can emerge, and I'm quite struck by linking this with the keynote speech that we heard today. And if you think of, if your theory of the two-peer problem is to connect with, then perhaps beyond cross-domain, a thing to think about will be, is the United States trying to separate the positions of Russia and China, and would that add to this problem or not? I'm sure this and several other things like this will come into the discussion when we go with that. For now, ladies and gentlemen, let's bear with this and let's go to our next speech. And I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Shao Leping, who is our next speaker. He is the Vice President of the Institute for China and World Studies. He's a professor and founding dean of the School of Political Science and International Relations at Tongji University in Shanghai. He is the Vice President of Shanghai Association of American Studies and Chief Supervisor of the Shanghai Institute for International Studies. He's a Senior Guest Fellow of the Institute of International Technology and Economics in the Center of the Development Studies under the PRC State of the Council. He specializes in nuclear arms control, global governance, East Asian security, and China's foreign policy, and has many books to his credit, inclusive of the China's national security and geopolitics, and several others that come in. If I go on with your introduction, Dr. Shao, perhaps it will be very, very relevant to go on and extend the session. So let me stop here and request you to give us your thoughts on the reshaping of the strategic stability by emerging and disruptive technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over the mic to Dr. Shaw, an administrative announcement. All those who had submitted their mobile phones are requested to collect them now so that the security team can leave thereafter. Dr. Shaw, you have the floor now.
Thank you.
You have 20 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank CISS for inviting me to make a presentation at this very important conference. Sorry for something wrong with my throat today. With the rapid development of science and technology, profound changes are taking place in the form of warfare and deterrence in the future. The emergence of unmanned operations, intelligent command systems, and new types of weapons based on new physical principles such as lasers and electromagnetic pulses is heralding an unprecedented military revolution. This will inevitably have an important impact on global and regional strategic stability. In the first part, I would like to talk about strategic stability faces complex challenges in the development of high and new technology. First, AI weapons have become new killer and will even change the rules of war and deterrence. Artificial intelligence technology has accelerated its penetration into the military field and has become an important driver of military transformation, giving rise to new forms of warfare. The Russian-Ukraine war is the first war in human history in which artificial intelligence weapons are put into the battlefield on a large scale, and the first war that came closest to the use of nuclear weapons on the battlefield since the end of the Cold War. The large-scale equipment and use of conventional AI weapons can affect regional strategic stability and even global strategic stability. Precision strike weapons with artificial intelligence can strike or even destroy underground strategic nuclear weapons command centers, thereby forcing the attacked party to use nuclear weapons against the attacking party first. If AI takes the place of humans in the control of nuclear weapons, it may make decisions that normal decision makers would not want to make. To use nuclear weapons, military AI is playing an increasingly important role in the new forms of warfare, such as space warfare and cyber warfare. A new strategic deterrence system based on artificial intelligence will compress human decision-making time and even change the control of war. Second, hypersonic weapons have become the new strategic deterrent artifact. Hypersonic weapons have greatly improved strategic penetration capabilities, and counter-hypersonic weapons are also emerging. This will become a new contradiction that will affect regional strategic stability and global strategic stability. Third, space has become the commanding heights and frontiers of strategic competition among countries. With intelligent space-based weapon systems and outer space as a battlefield, competition for space control will become more intense. Mastering the power of the sky will be the conducive to mastering the power of air, sea, and electromagnetic satellites deployed in space can change the battlefield situation from space. The use of Musk's Starlink in the Russian-Ukraine war is a typical example. The integrated deterrence and operation of land, sea, air, and space power grids will become a new trend which can affect regional strategic stability and global strategic stability. Fourth, deterrence in cyberspace has become one of the important factors affecting strategic stability. Deterrence in cyberspace is developing at a rapid pace. Cyberspace deterrence refers to the determination and strength to take various actions in paralyze and control of enemies, cyberspace, and to control the enemy's physical space across domains through cyberspace so as to achieve the strategic deterrence objectives of deterring, stopping, and containing the enemy. Some countries have taken cyberspace as a new battlefield for military superiority, pursued the concept of deterrence and offensive, introduced military alliance into cyberspace, promoted the formulation of rules of cyber engagement, increased the risk of cyber friction and conflict between major powers, and threatened international peace and security. Critical information infrastructure is facing greater risks and hidden dangers. Cyber attacks and cyber crimes have increased dramatically, and cyber terrorism has become a global public hazard. Cyberspace deterrence and large-scale cyber attack capabilities have an important impact on both regional and global strategic stability. Fifth, biosecurity have an important impact on human security and strategic stability. Biosecurity is an important part of a country's overall security and an important force affecting strategic stability. The outbreak of COVID-19 is an important example. In the second part, I would like to talk about the impact of artificial intelligence in U.S. armaments on the strategic stability between China and the U.S. against the backdrop of artificial intelligence sweeping the world and the escalating game between China and the U.S. The U.S. has vigorously promoted the process of artificial intelligence in the field of armaments and allowed it to penetrate from the field of conventional weapons to the field of nuclear weapons so as to maintain its military superiority and hegemony in the world. The militarized application of AI can not only greatly improve the intelligence level of weapons, but also accelerate the closure of military killing chain. With the widespread application of artificial intelligence in the war system, the combat process will be reshaped and the military killing chain will be accelerated and efficient. Faster perception, faster decision-making, faster action will become important ways for winning intelligence warfare in the future. The U.S. has become increasingly widely used artificial intelligence in many military fields, In an operational scenario, commanders often need to fully collect all relevant information and data in the environment, quickly form the understanding and judgment of the current situation, formulate the best course of action, and implement the requires them to follow the operational process of observe, judgment, decision-making, and act. A observation which mainly involves intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. The U.S. military nuclear intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance fields are supported by artificial intelligence technology. The U.S. can use AI technology to process data and identify signals to automatically identify and classify nuclear facilities, missile silos, and other relevant targets. The U.S. military is using AI to predict the launch of nuclear missiles. B. Judgment and decision-making, which mainly involves situational awareness and auxiliary decision-making. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Defense launched the Joint All-Domain Command and Control concept, which aims to connect all its sensors and combat units in real time so that all services can achieve seamless connection and coordination within each service, between different services, between U.S. military and allied forces, and in various combat domains such as land, sea, air, space, and cyber. On this basis, AI will provide real-time situational awareness and intelligent analysis with advanced data processing and communication technologies to assist the commander in making quick and accurate decisions. See the operational link, which mainly involves the application of autonomous weapon systems. The present U.S. military has launched and is still developing a variety of autonomous weapon systems. The United States active promotion of the application of artificial intelligence technology in military field and even in the field of nuclear weapons. Inducing a preemptive nuclear strike. The use of AI technology in the military field may disrupt the offensive and defensive balance between China and the United States in both offensive and defensive dimensions, thereby strengthening the incentive for the United States to carry out a preemptive nuclear strike. The empowerment of U.S. strategic strike weapons by AI, the weakening of China's second nuclear strike force, and the strengthening of U.S. deterrence capability may shift the offensive and defensive balance in favor of the U.S. side, leading to an escalation of the crisis. With the continuous development of AI technology, nuclear-related command control communication systems are increasingly dependent on AI to assist decision-making, although U.S. officials have made it clear that a nuclear-related decision-making system using AI will ensure a human-in-loop. The final decision in the U.S. will inevitably rely on AI judgment. In the event of a major military situation, commanders may choose to cede some decision-making power to AI to adapt to the rapid changes in the situation. The modern battlefield environment is become more and more complex. The combat effectiveness has increased, and the pace of warfare has been significantly. AI systems can provide necessary support for real-time decision-making, but they will trigger an intelligent arms race, enlarge the difficulty of technological control, increase the opacity of U.S. armaments. In the process of human-computer interaction, human beings are prone to form a mindset of over-trusting machines. In nuclear-related decision-making, there is a demand to ensure that the final launch of nuclear weapons in the hands of humans, but in practice, the transfer of some commander and decision-making power to AI may become the new normal in the field of strategic competition. In the final part, I would like to talk about how to reshape global and regional strategic stability. First, to understand the new concept and the scope of global strategic stability in the new situation. Since the end of the Cold War, especially in recent years, major changes have taken place in global strategic stability and its concepts. The new characteristics of comprehensiveness, multi-level, multi-domain, multi-form, and multi-role have emerged. Second, to abandon the older ideas of strategic stability and accept the new ideas of strategic stability. The old ideas of strategic stability was to expand military deterrence indefinitely. The new approach to strategic stability is based on equality and mutual respect. The third, nuclear weapon states should adopt a policy of no first use of nuclear weapons, or should declare no first use of nuclear weapons against each other. Fourth, to promote the establishment of a global governance framework for AI armaments. The global trend of AI in armaments, represented by ungrading of AI in U.S. armaments, has aroused great concern and extensive discussion in the international community on the risk of AI. At present, there is lack of widely accepted global governance framework in this field. The members of the international community, including China, should be committed to effectively managing the security, legal, ethical, and humanitarian risk caused by AI through consultation. Promote the formulation of restrictive principles for armaments and effectively enhance crisis stability. B, development of operational guidelines for artificial intelligence armament systems. Past experience have shown that maintaining the high reliability of the system usually require well-trained members, alertness to minor accidents, fluent information communication, and enhanced ability to respond to emergencies through continuous learning and simulation exercises. C, promote the member states of the international community to implement hierarchical and classified management of AI armaments and avoid the use of immature technologies that may have serious negative consequences. Promote greater transparency and non-proliferation of AI armaments and enhance the stability of the arms race. B, promote the international community to involve enterprises and institutions in formulation of relevant regulatory and governance framework for AI research and development. Attempt to expand the space for U.S.-China cooperation in averting catastrophic consequences of AI armament. At present, China and the United States have shown a certain degree of cooperation intention on this issue. Okay. China and the United States can take multiple measures to prevent the crisis from escalating. B, joint commitment to implement rigorous testing and validation process for relevant weapon systems to ensure they exhibit the expected behavior. C, improve crisis communication hotlines and emergency notification and mechanism. China and the United States should explore practical measures to manage the arms race. The 5, the United States and Russia should play constructive role in the restructuring of global strategic stability. They should continue to reduce their nuclear weapons. 6, to achieve strategic stability in Pakistan and India is the key to building strategic stability in South Asia. 7, nuclear weapons should not be controlled by artificial intelligence, but completely by humans. 8, to work to prevent the weaponization of space. 9, to strive to maintain a peaceful, secure, open, cooperative, and orderly cyberspace. Finally, both China and Pakistan must actively participate in the formulation of rules of operation and warfare of sky-grid and AI weapons, and actively participate in the international negotiations and the exchange on confidence-building measures and crisis control measures for the sky-grid and AI weapons. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shaw, for giving us rather racy but a whole extent of the situation as they can evolve, how serious it is. There are several, I'm sure there are several questions or comments on this presentation. If I was to kind of say it in one sentence, I would say perhaps that there's going to be unless the international community is willing to do something about it, there's going to be an arms race for sure, and at a very tremendously fast rate, where humans will definitely need algorithms to help out, and which can be an issue of the human involvement, or the question of how much of human involvement in such serious matters. So it's a very, very complicated subject, but I'm sure there will be several comments or questions on that. Let's leave it at this. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our third speaker, Dr. Naeem Salek, who's the Executive Director of the Strategic Vision Institute in Islamabad. He's taught at Quaid-e-Azam University, at National Defense University, and Air University. He's been a visiting scholar at CISS in Johns Hopkins, and a guest scholar at Brookings Institute, Washington, D.C., at Stanford University and Simpson Center as a visiting fellow. And he's been the Director of Arms Control Disarmament Affairs at the Strategic Plans Division. He holds a Master's in History, BSc Honors in War Studies, and MSc in Strategic Studies from University of Wales in UK, and a PhD from University of Western Australia. His areas of expertise, I can continue on them till the cows come home, but I think I would want to stop his introduction by saying I was a student when he first ever taught in a university. So I started my journey as a student when he was already teaching these subjects. Dr. Naeem Salek will be talking to us on the impact of emerging and disruptive technologies on the concept of nuclear deterrence. You have the floor, sir. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's not easy to be in the middle of such a distinguished panel, but I'll try to do my best. I will first of all try to give my perspective on emerging and disruptive technologies and then link it up with the deterrence concept itself. Once we talk of emerging technologies, this is a slightly misleading term because technologies do not emerge overnight. There are long gestation periods ranging from 15 to 25 years and sometimes much more. The example I can give you is of AI. This term was first used at Dartmouth College in 1955, but then nobody remembered it until 1997 when IBM's intelligence system Big Blue defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov in a 6-game match. So that was the first milestone. The second milestone was crossed when Google's DeepMind AlphaGo system defeated Lee Sedol, the world's top-ranked player of the Asian game of Go, 4-1 in 2016. So you can see how much time elapsed before the technology matured. The second problem with the emerging technologies is the cost effect. At times, the cost at the end of the process of research and development are so prohibitive that it's very difficult to induct these technologies at a significantly large scale to be of any effect. The third thing is what we come to know is the publicized capabilities, and one is never sure how they are going to fare in the actual war-like situations. So the capabilities which are publicized and advertised by the manufacturers, they may not live up to their reputation. And finally, in this regard is that as the technologies are developing, simultaneously, this has been a historical experience, simultaneously there is research and development going on the counter technologies. And by the time these technologies mature, there are counters already available or they follow very soon after. Now let's start with the AI. AI has already started seeing military applications, and one of the latest capabilities which has been demonstrated is the swarming of autonomous systems. We have heard of drone swarms, both aerial as well as the underwater systems. Now this kind of a thing is not possible humanly. AI can do it very effectively and get the maximum out of a large number of platforms acting in unison with each other. If a human was to control all these systems simultaneously to get them to perform a single task, it would have been much more difficult. So this is one area where the AI is going to be very effective. The second thing is that if you take out the human interaction from the AI systems, then the decision-making loop will shorten very greatly. It's also called the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide and act, which will enable the forces to react much more rapidly than their enemies if they are not using the same kind of system. So there is a danger here because everybody will be tempted to use these systems in the military decision making, thinking that the other side may be using it already. So they don't want to be defeated in time and space. And this kind of a thing would be very effective in the cyber domain especially. Then we have seen that the autonomous weapons have the capability to loiter indefinitely in the air over the battlefield area, and which was not possible previously for the manned systems. So this provides round-the-clock surveillance of the areas of interest, and that means there is a 24-hour battle, there is no respite at all. These systems are ever vigilant, collecting intelligence and striking targets as they appear. AI will also allow warfighters to bring big data to bear in the analysis of volumes of information. Now this was a big problem because after the information revolution, there were so many means of collecting information and intelligence that it was humanly impossible to analyze all that data to make any sense out of it. But with the help of these systems, now this huge amount of data can be processed in a very short span of time, and then it gives you options also to act on that. However, if we start relying on the system, there are a lot of risk also involved. First of all, the tempo of operations will be very high because the decisions will be quick, not necessarily well deliberated, and not necessarily always correct. The second thing is that if you start relying on these systems and keep the humans away from this, the compassion which is part of the human nature will be out of it. So the machines will be taking decisions on the basis of mathematical logic rather than human conscience or human compassion. Then there is another problem. AI systems are as good as the data they are based on, and the data sets are not available to every country equally. The two main repositories of big data these days are United States and China, and this will not be shared easily with everybody else. So this data, even if you have access to that database, it will be biased in favor of those who have compiled that data. So that has to be kept in mind, that the data will not always be neutral, it will be always biased in favor of those who have compiled the data. Secondly, there is a possibility of adversaries corrupting that data, and they can also hack into the systems and corrupt the data in a way that you may even not know and act on that, and it can lead you to commit mistakes. Intelligence, weapon support systems might not be sensitive to subtle nuances of political tensions. During crisis periods, there is a lot of signaling going on from either side. Now, whereas humans understand each other's mindset and they can look at the finer points of the signaling, the machines do not do that. They do not have that kind of capability. And deterrence, as we know, is something which is intangible. It is state of mind, it is signaling, it is influencing the thinking process of the other side. But machines will not pick up those signals. They will just work on the algorithms which have been provided to them, and therefore the chances of failure of deterrence are very high, because the deterrence signals and the changing of the decisions while the things are moving will not be there, because machine will go ahead and execute the tasks which have been assigned to them. Now, relating these technologies to deterrence and why we call these emerging technologies as disruptive technologies. I think with this such an enlightened audience, I need not explain what deterrence is. But however, I would like to highlight the three main ingredients of deterrence. First is capability, which includes weapons as well as delivery systems. Second is credibility, which is political will, which is intangible, and the second strike capability, which is the real credibility of deterrence. And third is the communication. Now, how these technologies are going to affect these elements of deterrence. As far as the capabilities are concerned, we know that a very important aspect is the secrecy of the location. We either put weapons in silos or put them on the mobile platforms, keep them moving around so that their exact location is not known at any given point in time, so that a counter strike cannot be made against them. Similarly, the most assured second strike capability is provided by the submarine based weapons because of the difficulties of identifying a submerged submarine. But with these new developments where the drones are flying overhead 24 hours, then there are microsatellites which are very cheap systems launched in large numbers. They will provide round-the-clock surveillance, and the submarines underwater will be watched by UUVs, the unmanned underwater vehicles, which would be acting in the form of swarms. Some of those will also be armed, and they can even attack with torpedoes the submarines if they find them. So if the second strike capability is compromised both on ground as well as under sea, then that is going to affect the credibility of deterrence to a large extent. Third is the communication, and obviously we know that the cyber capabilities can disrupt C4ISR systems, and that will create a lot of problems because it will then take away the capability of the decision makers to take decisions and convey them to the forces which have to take action. Another thing which is normally missed out once we're talking about these technologies are what we call the non-nuclear strategic weapon systems. Now these are mainly the hypersonic weapon systems. These are very precise, very high-speed weapon systems, maneuverable, difficult to detect, and these kind of weapon systems, because of their accuracy and their lethality, can be used very easily for first strike missions. And the kind of taboo which is associated with the use of nuclear weapons, that is also not there with these weapons. So the tendency would be, if you have these weapons, you would like to use those for first strike missions to disable the other side's systems before they are launched against you. And that is the biggest danger. In that eventuality, if you know that the other side has got access to these kind of weapon technologies, then both sides will be having their fingers on the nuclear button in a crisis situation, trying to beat other in the time and space and try to press the button before the other side has had the opportunity to carry out a disabling first strike. Then there is the danger of entanglement, because these kind of weapons which one, that there are dual use systems which can carry both conventional and non-conventional warheads, and then these non-strategic weapon systems, as I said, non-nuclear strategic weapon systems, if they are used for first strike, how would the other side react to it? Because for them the results are the same, whether they were attacked by the conventional or non-conventional ammunitions. So their response will be exactly the same as they would in case of a nuclear strike. So these are the areas where there are dangers of inadvertent escalation, and then there are other areas of entanglement also, where the conventional and non-conventional forces are co-located, and because of that co-mingling of the forces, any attack even on a conventional system could also affect the co-located strategic systems, and that can happen very easily in a country like Pakistan, which has a limited geographical space, and the likelihood is that the conventional and strategic weapons will be located closer to each other. There will be air bases, there will be naval bases where both kind of systems would be there, and strike on one could also affect the other, and that can lead to inadvertent escalation. So I think I need not go any further than that, because it will be at the cause of repetition. And I will end here. I'll be very happy to take any questions during the question answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salek, for running us through a very, very complicated, minefield-laden situation of the future, that it can happen, and something that as an international community we want it not to happen. If I was to think of a takeaway from this scenario that you built, perhaps one thing that I think we'll consider worth repeating out of several that you said is there's going to be more weapons, there's going to be intense speed, and there's going to be this question of the rational compassion versus the human empathy and the balance that comes about. So it's, I started in my opening remarks by saying it's complex and it's getting complicated. I'm still grappling with a third word that indicates that it goes further. But let's hear our two more speakers, and allow me to introduce now to you our Russian speaker who's online, Mr. Dmitry Stefanov, who is a research fellow at the Center of International Security at Primakov National Research Institute at IMEMO in the Russian Academy of Science. He's also a member of the Council for Foreign and Defense Policy, a member of the PIR Center Advisory Board. He's written extensively on global security, on strategic stability, nuclear weapons, and military applications of emerging technologies. So the whole hog. He's contributed to the events hosted by the Federal Council of the Russian Federation, King's College London, RUSI, UNODA, CIPRI, UNIDER, IISS, and Pugwash. So very extensively international global thinker, I would say this. And I hope, Dmitry, you can hear me. We are very eager to listen to you. You have 20 minutes, sir.
Yes, hello, I hear you perfectly. I hope same is true for you, and you also can hear me well. First, many thanks for CISS for having me on this panel. I am very sorry for not being able to be there in person in Islamabad, but still, I will do my best to contribute to the success of this conference. It is actually quite an enormous challenge to speak after such eminent scholars, so I will try not to repeat at least partly what has been said already, because, well, we know each other for a while, and then we have a lot of shared ideas, so I'll try to add extra flavor. First, I think it is high time to specify what we're actually talking about, because, well, we lack systematization when we talk about emerging technologies. Not we as a group of people on this panel, but we as a, well, global scientific community. Personally, I suggest that it might be a good idea to group these emerging and disruptive technologies into three baskets and then analyze their impacts. Basket one would be the so-called support technologies. And here, I think the paramount importance is for these supercomputing technologies, quantum technologies, because they provide opportunities for simulations of advanced weapons, including nuclear weapons. They can be used for nuclear weapon maintenance. They can be used in development of all other sorts of weapons that use emerging technologies. And also, these technologies can open room for such kind of niche, but still very important capabilities as weather forecasting on a global scale. Well, computational power is quite useful, and it also contributes to the planning of operations on a scale that is unmatched, unrivaled by any other options. Also, current military space capabilities are mostly of support nature, but I'll speak about outer space a bit later in greater detail. Basket two, from my perspective, should include combat technologies. Well, basically the technologies that are used in strike weapons. well, the most obvious example is the so-called scramjets, the air-breathing engines that are used or rather will be used for future hypersonic cruise missiles, but also other future types of rocket and missile engines fall into this category, because basically this is something that is used on a weapon. New materials, new fuels, new explosives. I think this, technologies also fall in this category. And what is crucial is that the support technologies I've mentioned earlier are very important to actually develop these new sorts of engines, explosives, fuels, and materials that are used in actual weapons. And well, basket 3 is a so-called universal basket. I'd put the famous two words artificial intelligence into this basket, because artificial intelligence is used both for support missions like logistics, like maintenance, like sometimes communications, but also they can be used for onboard guidance. They can be used for seekers. They can be used for all sorts of things inside the weapon to make it smart, to make it capable of autonomous terminal guidance and things like that. So what is the impact of these three baskets? Well, if we speak about combat disruptive technologies, I think it's the most clear thing, because if we talk about hypersonic weapons, and I'm a big fan of hypersonic weapons, as many of you probably know, it reduces time to kill and make missiles fly faster, be more maneuverable, and thus less vulnerable to defenses. So we move to a situation where we need fewer munitions, fewer missiles to destroy each possible target, which actually eventually might permit reductions of arsenals, and even potentially lead to new rounds of strategic sum reductions, although of course this is not something that we talk enough under current weather, under current international conditions, which is sad, but it is the reality that we should acknowledge. Autonomous combat systems that employ artificial intelligence capabilities in their guidance, they can be used in all environments. It can be air, sea, ground, outer space. And the good news is that such capabilities might reduce combat and even non-combat casualties. Also, the smart guidance generally increases the capabilities of all sorts of long-range weapons, including not only things like hypersonic weapons I've mentioned, but also the loitering munitions and drones and all sorts of these things. Speaking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, well, I think the crucial achievement is that they provide for optimization and for speeding up the intelligence data analysis, which leads to improve the decision making and improve situational awareness. As was mentioned by previous speakers, these days we have such a huge amount of data available to military planners that it is next to impossible to deal with this data without using decision-making support tools, which is actually not that new. It was clear that, for example, from the Russian perspective, from the Russian scholars, the artificial intelligence in military affairs originally focused on decision-making support, because it was the trend in the growing amount of data available for decision-making was clear decades ago. It is not something that happened overnight. Also, what can we say here? Outer space, as promised. We have quite a number of different missions that are military missions that are being fulfilled these days through outer space means. And I know that you will speak about it in greater detail in next sessions, but I will just say a few words here as well. Of course, as I just was talking about an enormous volume of data available to decision makers and to planners, AI is used to actually work on this data through obtaining raw data from satellites, from satellite reconnaissance, and so on. One of the trends that is not yet developed, but is already developing, is that the use of AI to actually mix data, raw data sourced from satellite constellations of different operators. And when this will be achieved, I believe it will be a major breakthrough. And also, I can imagine that we're not far from such a breakthrough. Also, due to development of new technologies, of microelectronics, and so on, we see more and more mobile spacecraft capable of in-orbit maintenance and in-orbit engagement. Then, again, this is not new, and this was mentioned by previous speakers, but directed energy weapons and electronic warfare systems, well, they have been emerging for years. They are very disruptive. We're not yet seeing full-scale deployment of such capabilities, but I think many of people in this room will see those during our lifetime. Finally, it is quite possible to use cyber weapons and, again, electronic warfare weapons not only to target satellite infrastructure, but also to disrupt the downlinks and uplinks, so the satellites will lose communication with their ground stations. What is very tragic and dramatic right now is that, some countries are pursuing superiority in outer space. When one country asks for superiority, for other countries it becomes quite a challenge to maintain the peaceful uses of outer space. So, what is the general situation? What is the general contributions of emerging and disruptive technologies to military affairs and to strategic stability? I think the question is the scale, because actually the biggest challenge is perception here. Potential adversaries' development of almost any disruptive technology-based system, and especially if we are speaking about strategic weapons domains, should be offensive or defensive or whatever, nuclear or non-nuclear, it will definitely be considered by other countries as an attempt to gain unilateral advantage and undermine strategic stability or, generally speaking, international security. For instance, we have empirical evidence that the unlimited development of missile defense systems by the United States prompted Russia's development of new nuclear weapon delivery systems, which use quite a number of emerging technologies. And in turn, these developments in Russian military led to were used by the United States to justify further development of their own arsenal, both nuclear and non-nuclear. In turn, the recently updated fundamentals of the Russian state policy on nuclear deterrence identifies quite a number of very specific technological threats that should be addressed through nuclear deterrence, which include aerial drones, hypersonic weapons, directed energy weapons, and even space-based anti-satellite weapons. So they went as specific as that. Of course, the particular importance is the introduction of disruptive technologies, including artificial intelligence, in the domain of nuclear command control and communications. Again, it was mentioned by previous speakers, but I would like to emphasize that the biggest challenge here is that the nature of NC3 is so sensitive that I can hardly imagine any possible transparency here or control or regime beyond the declaration that we're doing everything in a good manner and that's all, without explaining what is the actual manner how you're doing it. So I am quite skeptical that we might be able to achieve anything sensible in this area on the international arena. So what is also important is that the technologies, these new emerging technologies, can be very destabilizing if, again, this country wants to achieve and preserve advantages in all spheres while minimizing selected areas. We've seen it from our American partners or adversaries during the previous administration when they expressed readiness to discuss nuclear arms control at the same time pursuing advantages everywhere else, like non-nuclear hypersonic weapons, military capabilities in space, in cyberspace, and so on. The current US administration will likely follow this suit, and they will intensify such policies because they want to pursue all domain superiority as an ultimate goal. And still the good news is they are also trying to find ways to limit military spending, so there might be some openings for limitations on the arms race in the technological domain that we are witnessing. So while technological progress is making non-nuclear weapons increasingly lethal and proliferating, it doesn't mean that we're getting in a more secure space. What to do with that? Well, I have not many ideas on my menu. One is that we actually should work more on public strategic planning documents, because in this or that domains like airspace defense, AI, hypersonic weapons, or whatever. Because such doctrinal documents, they not only provide transparency in this domain and help to avoid misperception, but also preparation of such documents provides a perfect opportunity for self-reflection of one's own capabilities and intentions. Emerging technologies, they can lead to military destruction on unprecedented scale, and we see how it happens in some areas, in some regions of our world already. But also it can help to avoid it, and by enhancing deterrence. And I think the task for our scientific and expert community is to carefully study the consequences of introduction of selected technologies, and finally promote the proper training of future operators and decision makers who will be in charge of such technologies. Because ultimately, the problem is not in the technology itself, but in the user of this technology. And that I'll stop. Thank you for your attention. I hope I was heard well, and I'm looking forward to the success of this conference.
Thank you very much, Dmitry, for a very lucent canvas that you have given us. Perhaps the takeaway is that there is a lot of potential of destabilization, but then there is also space for diplomacy is the takeaway that I have, but I'm sure like others, there will be questions and comments on your presentation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are finally on to our last speaker of the day, who's, I just noticed, is something like Pakistanis, a practitioner as well as a scholar. Dr. Alexander Evans is the Associate Dean and Professor in Practice in Public Policy at the London School of Economics. He teaches courses on diplomacy, technology, and long-term policy making. He's a research fellow for Center of Public Diplomacy at UCLA. He's been there, and he's a career British diplomat who's worked as advisor to the Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, the Strategy Office Director in the Cabinet Office, Cyber Director in the Foreign Office. He's been British Deputy and Acting High Commissioner to India and briefly to Pakistan, has led the UN Security Council Expert Group, was an advisor, a senior advisor in the US Department of State in the first Obama administration. He has worked both in India and Pakistan. He has worked for UN AMA in Afghanistan shortly after 9/11, and has been the Henry Kissinger Chair at the Library of Congress, at Wales, at Nuffield College in Oxford. He's contributed to books and journals, the whole hog. And he's also been the Senior Research Fellow at the British Center for Army Leadership at Sandhurst with a PhD from CISS. He would be talking to us on strategic alliances in the age of emerging and disruptive technology. You have the floor, sir. You're the last speaker, 20 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can I take the clicker, if I may, for the slides? Well, shukriya. जब मैं पाकिस्तान में हूँ, मैं बहुत खुश हूँ. So it's always a pleasure to be back in Pakistan. I've spent a lot of time here, and so particular thanks to CISS for inviting me to join this very interesting conference. I should make a declaration to begin with. I'm not a deterrence expert. I'm not a deep expert on a particular pillar of emerging technologies, but a lot of my work has been on the interface between technology, international security, and decision making. And I would argue a lot of the themes that we've already talked about this morning are about apex decision making on war and peace, on deterrence, and in crises. And if I may, I was going to start by just reminding us something very obvious, that we are still surprised by surprise. I'm showing up on the screen a declassified CIA memo from 1982 talking about the problem of training analysts on being prepared for surprise. So I think one of the greatest challenges that's come out so far in the discussion is how do we build in just a comprehensive understanding of the normality of surprise into our strategic planning, our specific doctrine, and indeed the way in which we train military and civilian personnel. The second element, I think, picks up on what we heard from Dr. Hua in earlier remarks, which is we are living in an age of renewed great power competition. We don't know the name of the age we are living in at the moment, but it's certainly not the sunny uplands of the mid-1990s. And I'm quite fond of using art in teaching. This is a British artist called Tim Etchells. He does neon installations, and one of his pieces of art is all the things that could happen next. And I think part of what we need to engage here is imagination. Can we properly apply imagination to bring that into the space for procurement, strategic planning, and so on? And this reflects, I think, where we are on nuclear deterrence. We are moving from a period at least of relative certainty to at-risk capabilities. So I share with you here one thing that's quite well known. I'd be attributed to Mao Zedong after China grained the bomb. Atom bomb goes off when it's told. What boundless joy. The problem today is, will it go off when it's told? Will it go off when it's told? So there's a fundamental question here about command and control, but I think is injected by debates about emerging and disruptive technologies. I like this cartoon on the left. This is from the New Yorker. It's showing a husband come into the living room saying, wife, so just saying, he's been so much more attentive since he found out I had the bomb. There's no guarantee necessarily that nuclear weapons, again, give the status or the attention in the international sphere that they used to have. And that's also an important point. Just to labour the point, this is Ricardo Luna. Luna was the Peru's foreign minister and a very distinguished Peruvian ambassador to the UN, to Washington, to London. He was a professor at Princeton University, and Rick has this a law which I think is a very useful law to think about. And it's the law of the iron law of proliferating unintended consequences. The iron law of proliferating unintended consequences. And not only, I would argue, are we living in a period of radical uncertainty, we need to factor in the lunar law into our deterrence thinking. And it's quite difficult to find a modality or a vehicle to do that effectively. So disruptive and emerging technologies, we've already heard much of this morning already, but I would argue they have the scope to disable or disrupt command and control, to fundamentally alter the balance of power, including through hybrid, to deliver the effect of a strategic weapons system through non-kinetic means, and in particular, I have an interest in cyber and the emerging field of cognitive warfare, the application of behavioral science to decision makers and to military operators at scale. To render obsolete or to reduce the salience of existing or pipeline military capabilities. And it's worth also thinking about the fact that there's a layering here on decision making. Human beings and apex decision makers, whether they wear uniforms, whether they are civilians, whether they're politicians or bureaucrats, we tend to make a range of decisions that are indifferent, poor, or sometimes good. So layering on top of that the challenge of what's the technology input into this as well is an additional problem. And I would just cite historically, remember in the early 20th century, Germany, the United States, and the United Kingdom had a strategic competition on air power through the development of Zeppelins, right? And I don't particularly think that you see Zeppelins as the major force of air power today. Britain and France invested in Concorde, all right, a civilian capability, but it chose to be a major fail in terms of investment in industrial strategy. China and USSR had a border crisis in 1968, 1969, fueled by the inability of both Chinese senior officials and Soviet senior officials to understand the strategic intent of the other party. And it's not exclusive to that. The British have done it, the Americans have done it, it's happened in South Asia as well, but it's just recognizing the perennial nature of strategic misperception and misread. But I would argue the introduction of AI and the pace and speed, the elements of speed and decision-making that were being raised by Dr. Salek and Dr. Li Ping come into this as well. It's worth noticing that there are already cases where technology has disrupted capability. I don't know if you remember in 2018 the release of the Strava map. Does everybody familiar with that or not? This is a running app that tells you where you run. It allows you to keep the time as you run. And when there was a data release on 13 trillion GPS points, it inadvertently revealed the location of almost all secret military bases around the world. Because as we know, special forces love to run, and they love to run in circles around their bases. So the Strava data inadvertently revealed the location of basically black sites around the world. So this is one real-world example where big data and technology has already had an effect in terms of revealing presence and capability. And we can think about that in different forms. There is, of course, an interface between old and new, particularly with grey zone or hybrid operations. So we're seeing, obviously, cyber attacks, assassinations, disinformation, subversion. These aren't necessarily new, right? These aren't necessarily new. But the technology vectors for some of them are relatively new. So it's this combination of the old and the new. I like this poster. This is a poster from, I think, Denmark, which says, "Avoid becoming employee of the year at the Russian intelligence service." It's good advice in terms of security advice. And of course, we're seeing this big theme around economic statecraft. Chris Miller's famous book on chip war is one example. Adam Tooze, the historian, looking at actually machine tool manufacturing and industrial capability. Remember, it's not just about chips and technology and AI. It's also about the ability to do machine tool engineering, to do industrial production. So some of this is about traditional industrial capability. Some of it is about the application of new technology and intellectual property. And of course, we're seeing a fast evolving, fast reshaping space around the industrial capability globally. So if you look here about the balance of production and intellectual property around drone manufacture, the visual on the left is already out of date. Why? Because the Russia-Ukraine war is showing the application of drones and drone technology, and indeed around some of the experimental forms of cognitive warfare. We're seeing that in that battle space. We're seeing the deep uncertainty around AI models. Is there going to be a retail model that is available to all through DeepSeek, Or is there going to be highly concentrated capability around United States, primarily United States, AI, LLM capability? And we are seeing recent examples of surprise. One recent example was the attack on Hezbollah's C2 and communications infrastructure using detonating pagers. So forms of innovation are already having strategic effect. It's worth remembering one historic example of this. For the Battle of the Atlantic in World War II, counter-submarine warfare in the Atlantic was critically important. Many people will have heard of Bletchley Park and the Enigma machine and breaking codes. That tends to attract a lot of attention. But equally important was centimetric radar. Breaking codes allowed you to know that there was roughly a submarine somewhere in F7 or F6 in Islamabad. Centimetric radar allowed you to say it's at House 45, Street 7. And it allowed you to sink the submarine. So part of a problem we have, and this is Paul Kennedy, the historian's work, part of a problem we have around technologies, we have also a bias. We tend to be biased towards more exciting or excitable technologies, and we're not thinking in an integrated fashion about what's the full technology spectrum we need to accelerate the kill chain, as Mr. Stefanovic was speaking about. I'm particularly interested, this is the USSR decision to invade Afghanistan in 1979, and an account of the defense minister of the USSR basically saying that this was a reckless decision. Yeah? This is in some of the archival work on the decision making around it. We already know that we are capable of making poor decisions at crisis points or in terms of the application of force. The risk is for speed and pace and the application of algorithmic decision-making as well as rational and behavioral forms of decision-making, creating a apex decision-making environment that is less, actually is this odd mix of being high fidelity, we have more data, but low fidelity, the quality of our decision-making may end up being poorer. And that's an irony, I think, that we need to explore a little bit. So moving on, the human problem, and this is where I'll conclude, who understands any or all of this in government, right? If anybody tells you they're an expert in AI and scramjets and swarm drones and nuclear deterrence and cyber and space, I would suggest that what you have identified is a unicorn, right? And unicorns, as we know, my 8-year-old thinks they may exist, but I would assert that unicorns largely don't exist. So we need to be thinking about human capital and capability, both in terms of expert communities, as Mr. Stefanovic was talking about, but also in terms of apex leadership. How do we need to train our general staff? How do we need to train our strategic leadership around some of these issues? Effective grand strategy, I would argue, requires persistent doubt and imagination. And those are qualities that are not often found, and I say this self-referentially, amongst bureaucrats. They're not always the qualities that are most valued when you're training, when you're selecting for general staff promotion. So how do we inject that quality of imagination and doubt into what are, relatively speaking, command and control decision-making structures? And the reason why we need to do that is the cartoon on the left. This is as you see, a castle, and it's somebody saying to the king, "Bad news, Your Majesty. It's a cyber attack." Yeah? So suddenly your assumptions about deterrence and capability are unmoored by the reality of emerging and disruptive technology. I would argue for apex decision makers, we need to be moving from a what for to a what if capability. Yeah? And this is similar to the debate around logistics and redundancy. We've moved from a just-in-time to a just-in-case approach around resilience and capabilities. And here we pivot to the task I was given. I do eventually get there, I promise, which is around what's the international on this? I would argue international partnerships and engagement can be an insurance policy. It's an insurance policy. It reduces critical dependencies, it enhances insight, It can deepen interoperability without obliging pre-commitment, and that's important. So it maintains strategic autonomy for states and decision makers. And it increases options for political and logistical support in a crisis or conflict scenario. And I would just point out briefly, just before closing, we have this is a brain scan of people in back-to-back meetings. I don't know if people have seen this. The brain scan of what happens if you're in back-to-back meetings and the cognitive load on your brain versus if you take short breaks down below. So there's a range of neuroscience that shows being always on, checking the signal and the WhatsApp and the messages and the high side and the low side and the briefing and so on from dawn to dusk is very bad for decision making. It's very bad for strategy. It's very bad for thinking creatively or thinking about long-term policy planning and future. So we need to find some way of offsetting this challenge, which is only getting worse in the last 20 years, not better. And I'll just finally close, last slide. International engagement enhances insight and capability. For people who are familiar with Isaiah Berlin's argument about foxes and hedgehogs, whether you need generalists or specialists, you need a bit of both. The neo-generalist, as this illustration suggests. We need people who live in more than one world, but who bring diverse experience to specialisms they work on. And we need connectors. And on emerging technologies and disruptive technologies and deterrence, particularly thinking about bridging nuclear deterrence, cyber, and space, I would argue we need to have connectors and neo-generalists that can better inform and improve the quality of advice and decision making. Thank you very much.
I'm just thinking of how to kind of give you a quirky one-liner on what Alexander once told us. It's complicated, it was complex, it's complicated, and now here's a thought. Gen Z or Alpha, or perhaps Beta if you like, including Alexander's 8-year-old, are being taught subjects that they will not be working on as they grow older. That is not only a pretty jest, that is also a somber reflection of how things can be provided. We all don't act collectively, and keeping in view, and here's the catch, of the regional sensitivities as they exist. So these are some of those thoughts, and ladies and gentlemen, some tears, some sweat, and now is the time to draw blood. We have some time for a Q&A. We have some questions. There are some who are very, very eager. I think we will be able to take 2 sets of questions, and allow me to take, if the panelists allow that, we will take a set of questions and then go through this. When you, please raise your hands, also identify your affiliation, prefer a question rather than a comment, although I'm not precluding that, and keep it crisp so that we can accommodate as many as possible. So that's when we start. Okay, we start with this lady on the right side, and then the gentleman here in the middle.
Okay, I am Fujinaz Hedri, an independent researcher and a PhD candidate at Defense and Strategic Studies Department, Quaid-e-Azam University. First of all, I'd like to commend the esteemed panel for such a comprehensive and enriching session. My question pertains to the implication of AI in South Asia, that how does India's rapid militarization of AI and its pursuit of AI enabled ISR platforms, autonomous weapon systems, and early warning systems affect the strategic calculus of South Asia?
Madam, are you addressing it to a particular panelist?
No, anyone can answer.
Okay, anyone?
Or any expert on the issue of South Asia.
On anyone commenting on the issue of South Asia. Please hold this thought, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll take some more questions. We'll take this gentleman and the gentleman at the back, right behind him.
My question is to Mr. Alexander, right.
Please take the mic.
Mr. Alexander, how we can regulate the application of emerging technologies? Some of these technologies are being used for peaceful purposes and also in the war zone, right? I just mentioned about SpaceX, for example. Stargate program or the Starlink program of Mr. Elon Musk. They're using the Starlink satellite system in Ukraine in support of Ukrainian forces to provide them communication, intelligence, surveillance, and also sensitive data. And now Mr. Elon Musk is saying that by 2027, entire global communication will shift to Starship or Starlink system in the world. How we can ensure that our data that is communicated through Starlink, that is could be our personal data, could be our health data, could be our public data.
So the security of the data?
Could be our military data.
Okay.
How we can ensure that that data is not being misused by some forces, particularly when they have influence on such private enterprise.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you. Sir, thank you. This is Dr. Sufiarullah from Maritime Center of Excellence, Pakistan Navy War College. First of all, my compliments to the whole panel for their insightful presentations. My question is for Dr. Naeem Salik, sir, and it relates to South Asian context. Sir, as you know that India is ambitiously pursuing, developing, and integrating emerging and disruptive technologies into its military infrastructure. Now, considering that the current political regime in New Delhi is currently operating under the ideology of Hindutva that aspires to subjugate whole of the region to India, and lately we have seen this in Indian strategic behavior to actually employ military capabilities as an instrument of policy. So in this context, sir, how do you visualize the future of strategic stability in South Asia? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I am Zahir Kazmi. It's a question to all the panelists because all of us almost express skepticism about use of AI in nuclear command and control. But if you recall the joint statement between amongst former President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping in November last year, in which they both agreed that they would exercise human control rather than give preference to the artificial intelligence and nuclear command and control. Although this was not codified into a bilateral agreement, but do you think that US and China would reach such an agreement in future? And could this be codified into an agreement amongst P5? Because if they set the ball rolling, it will affect all of this. Thank you.
The gentleman behind you.
I'm Adil Sultan. I teach strategic studies at the Air University. Zahir has done a preemptive strike, so the same question has been taken away. So I'll switch to another question. Recently, a former US ambassador, she claimed that China is interested in placing its second strike capability in Pakistan. I understand it's part of the narrative. We have faced this situation earlier, and they just want to project Pakistan and China kind of in a negative spotlight. But I would like to Brigadier Salik also to take this question, and also Dr. Leaping. Would there be ever a need for China to place its second strike capability on a Pakistani territory or not? Thank you.
Okay, let's just start from the right side. There are some questions about South Asia. We'll request the panelists to respond as they would like to react to any of those questions. So, Brigadier Salek, Dr. Salek.
Thank you. First question about the impact of AI in South Asia. I think as far as the developments in AI and its integration into the military systems is concerned, South Asia is far behind. The leading two countries in the world are United States and China in this field, because it requires very heavy investment, and nobody has the kind of resources which these two countries can muster. And the third in that order is Russia. India is making an effort, but it is still some distance away from achieving a really meaningful capability in terms of the integration of AI in the military systems. I think Sufyan's question was also somewhat similar. These are overlapping questions. The point is that they say that give the devil his due, but don't try to give him overdue. We try to, I think, exaggerate India's capabilities, and that creates problem for us. And as I said earlier, as these capabilities develop, the counters are also developing, and counters are usually much cheaper to develop. So if India is working in this field and they are trying to develop capabilities, rest assured that Pakistan will either develop matching capabilities or at least have effective counters to nullify that advantage if India wants to attain that. Unfortunately, Indians, as I would say, that if they had some sort of that kind of mechanism, their BrahMos missiles would not have been running amok across the borders here and there. The third question about the statement by Biden and Xi, I think the kind of upheaval we are seeing in the world today, where Mr. Trump is just throwing out of the window whatever was done by the previous administration, this statement is, I think, just a very minor thing to just be dismissive of. I don't think so. Such an agreement is on the horizon in the foreseeable future. And lastly, China's second strike capability, I think this is flight of imagination. Probably this person, whosoever has come up with this idea, needs a dose of artificial intelligence, because his natural intelligence seems to be quite deficient. This is the kind of thing which the Indians propagated in the 1990s. They just related a nuclear test at Lopnor test site in China with the visit by Pakistani Foreign Minister Sabza Yaqub Khan to Beijing, and they said that that test was probably test of a Pakistani device on the Chinese nuclear test site. And I asked the question from one of the Indian diplomats who was very vociferously taking up that point. I said, Madam, can you tell me, did that blast give a green-colored mushroom cloud so that you could be so sure that it was a Pakistani blast? So these are the kind of things I think people can do all sorts of kite flying. Let's not take these seriously.
Thank you. Dr. Shaw, could you care to take this question that came about China?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the questions. Now, China has been developing the second strike capability, and also China has been paying very importance on the development of second strike capability. And to my understanding, now Pakistan also, you see, now has been developing some kind of second strike capabilities. But Pakistan maybe now focus both the first strike capabilities and the second strike capabilities. And but to my knowledge, and also I don't think Chinese experts understand what Pakistan now more focused. So I think it's important to have more exchanges between the experts and the scholars of two countries. So China and Pakistan experts can have better mutual understanding. Thank you.
Any comment, Dr. Hua, that you would want to make?
Let me talk about the Xi and Biden's, the human role in the common control. I think there are two occasions when they talk about the two leaders try to reach a kind of arrangement on this issue. The first one is San Francisco summit meeting 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and the second one is, there's an announcement or joint statement, no formal joint statement, but they talk about the arrangement. So I don't know what exactly happening, but I think there may be some very subtle change in the first one and the second one. And I heard some news talking about maybe the United States does not really want to have a very formal arrangement on this. But anyway, I think in principle, China does not exclude the possibility to move this kind of arrangement between the two countries and also put forward to the P5 arrangement too. The opportunity, alternative is never to be ruled out.
Dr. Wentz, there's a question about regulation of emerging technologies and also about the data security. I also have another question for you from online that says, could we hear more about the lunar law? So that's from Nicholas Ayala. So could you care to answer any of those questions?
So thank you. Well, let me try to speak for Rick first. Ricardo Luna is still in Lima in Peru. I would direct you towards him on this, but I consider myself on a mission to promote the lunar law because I think the lunar law is actually highly useful and applicable in training and in strategy. On the question, sir, that you asked about regulation, look, a couple of things. Number one, we live in a post-privacy world, right? We live in because we all carry these. We live in a post-privacy world, and we should get used to that. But it means on data, I think we then need to distinguish between data that is essential for national security, which I think we still can harden and protect up to a point, and data that is used in general society. The challenge on that is helpful if you're thinking about strategic weapons systems. It's not helpful if you're thinking about military logistics and the application of military force in general, because you're reliant on that civilian data capability. You're reliant on the critical national infrastructure. On regulation, well, when it comes to Starlink, it's difficult because it's up in the sky, right? So that's that issue of how can you extend national regulation to something that is in space. But there is a question, I understand, I'm not an expert on Starlink, but there's a question about how much capacity Starlink would have, even with the full deployment of Starlink globally. But there is an answer on this, and it's telegraph regulation. Go back to the 19th century. I was sat in Dundee in Scotland doing research on this at the beginning of January. The early legislation on telegraphs, the Telegraph Conference of 1902 or 1903 in London, there was a national security exemption. It allowed governments to switch it off It allowed governments to restrict the use of the telegraph, including by hostile or other states. So you build into a regulatory framework national security framing that allows you to protect your national security equities.
All right. I have three more people on the list and about 20 more. So let me go in the order that I saw the hands coming up. We start with this lady at the back. Yes, madam. Either mic le jaye. And there's another lady on this left side. And then this gentleman at the back. Then we'll come to the rest of you if you can afford the time.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. I'm Aiza Azam. I work at the Air University as a faculty member. My question refers to a comment that Dr. Xia Liping made earlier, where he said that in the process of human-machine interaction, human beings tend to become over-reliant on the use of machines. And given the discussion that followed about how the decision-making that machines can offer is very much reliant on it's only as good as the data that they actually get. So it just started me thinking, do we think, and any of the panelists could answer this, do we think that there might be moving forward an increasing emphasis on building trust, not just in terms of communication channels among different countries, but also in terms of building interpersonal trust and communication skills among the different leaders? Because certainly in a crisis situation, and several come to mind, for instance, what happened during the Cold War with the Cuban Missile Crisis, etc. It was communication which ended up saving the day. So I was wondering if moving forward in the age of emerging and disruptive technologies, whether we're going to see an increasing emphasis on trust building and interpersonal communication. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I am Siddha Rahman. I am a research analyst. My question is directed to Brigadier Naeem Salik. I would like if Dr. Alexander throws some light on the subject. My question is that you have mentioned that there are so many technologies in this age of emerging technologies. Even the second strike capability has been undermined. So my question is that on the basis of this immaculate intelligence and on the basis by relying on the non-nuclear strategic weapons, is there a possibility in future that a non-nuclear weapon state may attack on a nuclear weapon state to disarm from its nuclear arsenal? So how do you see this aspect of emerging technologies in future? Thank you.
My name is Zohaib Altaf, and I am from CISS AJK. My question is that whenever, even from first General Assembly resolution that was passed on AI, it talked about responsible use of AI. So my question is that what is the definition of responsible use of AI?
Who are you addressing this to?
Any panelist can answer.
Okay, any panelist.
Hello, I'm Hamza Zaman, and I'm Assistant Research Associate at Islamabad Policy Research Institute. My question is from Dr. Alexander, and also if Dr. Naeem Saleh could also add in his comments about that. So basically in recent times, emerging technologies have reshaped the context of concept of deterrence in the contemporary world order. So if we talk about South Asian context, what bilateral measures should be taken by Pakistan and India to maintain deterrence stability in the era of emerging and disruptive technologies? Thank you.
All right, we are frightfully close to the closing time, so I'm going to take two last questions. One, this gentleman up front, and one at the back.
Thank you.
The rest of you, please join them over lunch and ask those questions.
Thank you, sir. I am Nasir Hafiz, and Director of Research at SVI. It is very interesting to listen to perspectives from China, from Russia, to some extent I can say to Britain and to Pakistan. So it is a comprehensive view of technology and the human problem of decision making, which is now being confronted by the machine decision making. But I wonder what has been the historical view of human decision making in the past. We have been suffering from the concept of war and peace ever since, so it was the result of the human decision making. So there has been a catastrophic use of force where we suffered, the humanity suffered. So we are not, I think, looking for coming back to the human, because the human decision making was also problematic. So this is being assisted by the machine decision making. My point is that you talked about, Dr. Alexander, a weapon of mass destruction, mass distraction. A very interesting articulation. But I think it has to be further added up with the weapons of mass control. There is an effort to control perspectives, the view of about what the world looks about. And you also talked about what for. What is the purpose of this entire race of war or peace or technology? So my view is, can there be, the question is, can there be another view of looking at the question of war and peace other than the secular, the dominant secular contemporary view of, you can say from a civilizational perspective or ideational perspective? Thank you.
Last question at the back.
Thanks. Hello everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for your speeches. I'm from Russian Embassy, and I have a short question for Mr. Alexander Evans. According to your slides, we have seen that you give an example of role participant of USSR in Afghanistan, but don't you think that especially after not clear goals of NATO alliance in Afghanistan, it's better to give an example of using by United States nuclear weapon against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, sorry. Thanks.
Alexander, why don't we start with you and we go in this order to respond to the questions. So several put to you directly.
Well, thank you very much. Look, in response to the last question, I mean, nobody has a monopoly on bad decisions. And, you know, I can promise you that every single government has a glorious litany of bad decisions. That's the value of secrecy, right? If we're really lucky, we lock them away somewhere so nobody ever finds out. But I think you know, my more serious point would be, I think you know, it is really important for us to all be looking reflectively at our own practice as well as looking at comparative examples. On a couple of the other questions, if I may, I mean, sir, on your question about values, yes, it is important to be thinking about values on this as well. I hope people do not interpret my remarks as being skeptical about the additive value of technology, data science, and AI. I think it can improve the quality of decision making, but I would be wary about a reliance on either technology alone or humans alone, and values matter, and on emerging technology and deterrence, you know, what could we do if we're thinking about a South Asian context? I'm British, so I always felt it was quite good to get out of the business of telling South Asia what to do. It was good policy since 1947. We're trying to stick to it. But I think there's a general line here, which is actually raised by Mr. Stevanovic, which is a value of track 1.5s in general. And we see that in a China-US context, we see it in different contexts. There's a value also in terms of public doctrinal statements. So I think having some degree of openness, there are obviously things that are classified, but some degree of openness is helpful as well. And finally, on could you have an environment where a non-nuclear state used strategic capabilities to try to disarm a nuclear state? I would argue that would be a very high-risk enterprise indeed. A very high-risk enterprise indeed. You would need to have the full confidence that you could do that and get away with it. And I would argue that if I was an advisor or a decision maker, I would be deeply reluctant and skeptical of anybody who advised me that that would be possible to do, particularly in an era of tactical nuclear weapons.
Any comments or response, Dr. Hua?
Very brief response to the question about the new technology and the strategic stability in South Asia. I think it's too early to talk about that in a comprehensive way, but I just want to take an example. For the two countries, India and Pakistan, had really taken some measures to improve the confidence building between these two countries when we talk about traditional nuclear strategic stability. For example, the advanced missile launching notification, and also the non-strike against the nuclear facilities between the two countries back in the late 1980s or the beginning of the 1990s. I think that's a very good approach for the two countries to talk about maybe the new technology, what kind of a role of that in the strategic stability in South Asia.
Thank you. Dr. Shah, perhaps you would like to take that communications question. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. Communication is very important, especially on the current very complicated and changing fast geostrategic situation, and to prevent miscalculation, misoperation. And for example, even now there are many problems between China and the United States, but the both countries share the common interests. That is, the both countries understand nuclear weapons should be controlled by human beings instead of artificial intelligence technology. And so last year, both countries reached agreement about this. So now I think China and the United States and also other countries should have more communications. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Salik, could you take the rest of the comments that came to you, or any other comment that you'd like to make?
I think first question about a non-nuclear weapon state attacking a nuclear weapon state with non-nuclear strategic weapons. First of all, we have to see that can anybody be sure of 100% success of any preemptive first strike? Even in case of nuclear weapons, it was not obvious. It was just to give you an example. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy was suggested by one of his advisors that we have 17 times more ICBM than the Soviet Union, so let's carry out a preemptive strike and take care of all these once for all. He said, what's the guarantee of success of that strike? Can it be 100%? They said no. He said, can 2 of these ICBM survive? He was told, yes, quite possible. And his answer was that I cannot put at risk Washington and New York for the sake of this strike. So that is the kind of power which nuclear weapons have. And if a non-nuclear weapon state tries to do that, they'll be running a much greater risk. The problem with these weapons is that they are highly accurate, but they have rather small warheads. Their lethality comes from the kinetic energy because of their high speed, hypersonic speeds. But they can never be as effective as a nuclear weapon hitting against a nuclear storage site or nuclear weapon. So it will be partial. Only thing is that these new technologies have given an opportunity to the smaller countries and middle powers particularly to compete with nuclear weapon states. We know there are only 9 nuclear weapon states in the world, but the AI and other kinds of technologies which are emerging, these can be accessed by many other countries who even gave up their nuclear weapons capabilities. Countries like Japan, South Korea, most of the European countries, they will be able to compete with the major powers in this domain. But certainly nuclear power weapons will remain nuclear weapons, their lethality remains intact. The second question about whether India and Pakistan can agree to regulate the emergence of these technologies, the point is that, and Professor Hanwha also mentioned some of the confidence building measures agreed between India and Pakistan, like non-attack on each other nuclear facilities and like missile test pre-notification. But it's ages since the last CBMs were negotiated between India and Pakistan, and there is no overarching restraint and risk reduction mechanism in place in South Asia at the moment. These CBMs are there, and to our good luck they are still being followed, but India has refused to even talk to Pakistan. So if one side is totally refusing to talk to the other side, no CBMs or no agreements or no understandings can be reached. It is only possible if whenever it happens, the dialogue starts between the two countries, only then these kinds of arrangements can be brought about.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, how do you, pardon my French, how the hell do you conclude such a session? So here's a thought. I was thinking of those issues of, it was already complex and it's complicated. What's the third C? The third C is that the good side is the conversations have started, including of this kind of a session, where more thoughts still need to come. So here are my closing remarks. I just have 23 points. Okay, just 2 points. The one thought that I want to start with is, there's an old movie called I, Robot, in which one out of a series of robots, one starts to think like humans, and it has to be put down. And the maker, the scientist who created him, is taking it to the lab, and he asks her, will it hurt? The human consciousness. So human consciousness, with all its follies, provides the data to the algorithm, and we, even if that imperfect data informs the algorithm, we still need to keep the human control relevant. That is one thing that has echoed in all the presentations one way or the other. So that's an important point to take away and perhaps continue with our conversations. And the second point is, the emerging technologies are something which, for which you do not need a very large industrial base. So there will be countries, including some smaller countries, which will continue to evolve those technologies. Until that time, there will be low salience of lawfare. There are noises about autonomous weapons, but not real progress is being made. That is where the conversation should take us more into building confidence that the technicalities or the space of ambiguity does not permit accidents to happen. With this somber thought, may I request all of you to join me in thanking this panel for giving us brilliant conversations. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, sir. We extend our sincere gratitude to Air Commodore retired Khalid Banuri, along with our distinguished speakers, Dr. Han Kwa, Dr. Shah Leping, Dr. Naeem Salik, Dr. Alexander Evans, and Mr. Dmitry Stefanovich for sharing their valuable insights. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the presentation of souvenirs and shields as a token of our appreciation. For this, I have the honor of inviting the Executive Director of CISS, Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi, to kindly present these souvenirs. I kindly request Advisor NCA, Lieutenant General Retired Mother Jamil, to present souvenirs and shields to speakers. To begin, may I request Dr. Han Hua to graciously step forward to receive the souvenir and shield, please. Now I request Dr. Han Hua to please step forward to receive the souvenir and shield. I now request Dr. Naeem Salik to please come forward and receive the souvenir and shield. Finally, may I request Dr. Alexander Evans to step forward and accept the souvenir and shield, please. Although Mr. Dmitry Stefanovich joined us virtually and is unable to receive his souvenir and shield in person, we extend our sincere appreciation for his thought-provoking insights on the topic, Influence of Emerging Technologies on the Changing Character of War. We are truly grateful for his valuable contribution to today's discussion. Finally, I have the honor of inviting our session moderator, Air Commodore Retired Khalid Banuri, to kindly step forward and receive his souvenir and shield in recognition of his excellent moderation and valuable contributions. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it marks the end of our working session 1. Thank you for your patience. Now we will have a break time for lunch. The speakers and dignitaries are requested to go at the right side of the hall for lunch, and the rest of the dignitaries, attendees are requested to go to the back to the hall where the lunch will be served. Thank you.